It says, and when Athaliah, the mother of Ahaz, what's his name? Ahaziah, saw that her son was dead, she arose and destroyed all the seed royal. But Jehosheba line is married into the Davidic line, essentially, and into this. And what we're going to find out here as we look at this, we're going to look at both the tragedy and the triumph in this story. Because everywhere in the Bible, where you find tragedy, you find triumph. By the way, there's never a victory unless there's something to have victory over. Overcomers had to overcome. And so there's always a spiritual battle, and for every hero in the Bible, we're also going to find a villain, and for every villain, we're going to find a hero. And in this story, Athaliah is our villain. She is sinister. If you took, if you took the Wicked Witch of the West, Cruella de Vil, Mary Magdalene, and Sanger, what's her name, first name, Sanger? Margaret Sanger, you put them all into one, you'd have Athaliah right here. A very evil and a wicked woman, daughter of Jezebel. You know, the witch doesn't fall far from the tree, or from the broom, or however you want to put it. And so her son dies. And what does she decide to do? We're talking about, she decides to kill all of his sons. Who are they? These are her grandchildren. Most of them would be, they would be her grandchildren. She's deciding to take the lives of her grandchildren. Why does she take the lives of her grandchildren? We'll talk about that in just a moment. But what I want you to understand here is that there is a progression. We see the same thing in the Old Testament, in the Bible, and the Scriptures that we see today. There is always a progression. You know, those who favor abortion and many other ungodly things today, what label do they advertise themselves as? What are they? They are called progressives. Boy, that's a sweet sounding name, isn't it? Progress. Well, progress is only good if it's going in the right direction. You know, you can progress in the wrong direction. We call that regression. But you're making progress. You're just making progress going the wrong way. You know, I baptized 2 people today. Wasn't that a blessing? And so the first part is going under. Now, I could say, hey, I'm making good time going under. Everything's going well going under. Let's just keep progressing going under. Not a good idea, is it? No. See, then we got to come back up because we fulfill that type. Buried in the likeness of his death, raised to walk in the newness of life. It's a picture of the death, the burial, and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. You know, I remember one time I got how many of you have ever gone on the wrong road? Or have you ever gotten on the right road going the wrong way? I've done that a few times. And that's when we're taking a long trip and nobody's paying attention. That's when I take an exit and say, I got to go to the bathroom or get a coffee or something and go to the exit. Then get back on the highway, go in the correct direction. They never knew I made a mistake. You learn how to cover these things up after a while. But you're going the wrong way. You're making great progress in the wrong direction. And while they're progressive, do you realize that Athaliah, what did she do? I mean, she is slaying her grandchildren. How is so cruel and so heartless that you can take the life of your... Listen, I got 2 precious granddaughters. You better not touch them or else. You got to go through her. And if you survive that, which is very doubtful, you got to come through me. Or whichever one of us just gets there first. That's all I got to say. How does somebody do something so unnatural? Can I tell you, it started because what did Jezebel introduce to Israel? Baal worship. Do you understand what Baal worship is? You see this, it was the religion of the Canaanites. In the Old Testament, you often read about Moloch. And sometimes you just get so busy reading through your Old Testament, you don't stop and say, well, who is that? What is that? What does that mean? And people talk about how it was so unkind for Israel to go in and take the land of the Canaanites. Do you realize what they were doing there? Their worship consisted of something similar to this, where they would take their babies, they would put them in the lap of this god, this false god, this idol here, and there was a fire that was kindled in his lap, and that fire would consume those living babies. And they would take those ashes, and they would put those ashes in the foundation of their home. That's what you had to do with every firstborn child. And the Israelites began to practice this under Jezebel. You wonder why Elijah was so upset. You wonder why Elijah stood in the crowd that day and he says, "Choose you this day whom you will serve." I'm actually quoting Joshua there, but it's very similar. He said, "How long halt ye between two opinions? If God be God, serve him. If Baal be God, serve him." But when you start doing that, what's it do? It begins to cut off your conscience. And we're going to progress. And we're progressing in the wrong way. And now it's nothing for Athaliah. Listen, she's been worshiping Moloch and Baal all her life. It's nothing for her to take the life of these children. Where do you think we go next? I'm just asking for a friend. Where do we go next when we give up on this battle? Where do we give up when we say, well, we've lost that battle, let's move on to another one? Well, how far can we go without a culture of life? There is a progression that is taking place, and we need to be careful about that progression. I want you to notice something also, coercion. You realize here that Athaliah was making a choice for someone else. She did not make a choice that her son would have wanted made. Do you think? He's dead. He's gone. You think he would say, boy, I hope after I die my mom kills my children? I don't think so. Hey, you know what? These babies all had mothers still living. Did she ask their permission? No. You know what? She took a choice that did not belong to her. She made a choice for someone else. This is from the Federalist.com, and the Federalist Society. And they point out here, they said, one study from pro-life side reported in an initial study of women, 64% of those who aborted felt pressured to do so by others. This pressure can become violent. In other words, intimidation and threats. Tony told us about some of these things in our Sunday school class this morning, where parents have told their children, listen, if you don't abort that baby, if you don't abort that child, you're not living in this house. Threw them out of the house because they chose life. 65% suffered symptoms of trauma, and in the year following an abortion, suicide rates are 6 to 7 times higher. Imagine that. They feel pressured to commit abortion. They're told that they'll be abandoned if they don't do it. Whether it's their boyfriends, whether it's their rapist, as a parent or a grandparent, they're intimidated into doing this. Then when they do it, that guilt sets in and that depression. You got to love these ladies. I'm just telling you. You got to have your hearts go out to them. Somebody pushed them into doing something that was very bad for them. Coercion. That's what we're talking about. Here is from the Daily Beast. Worst abortions. A new study shows they're common. A new study shows that reproductive control, that's the sanitized word they like to use, when a man allows or forces his partner to get pregnant and makes her have an abortion, is more common than you would think. I didn't say that. They said that. How common is coercion? In America and elsewhere, pressure or even forced abortion, deceptive or negligent counseling, and direct or indirect forms of blackmail, assembly line, or for-profit driven clinics, substandard medical practices, and other factors work in concert to funnel women toward unwanted abortions. Coercion can escalate to violence or homicide, the leading killer of pregnant women. It's from a website called theunchoice.com. They say it's choice not for 64% of the women. They also write this on, and yet another of 252 women who were seeking help and coping with past abortions, 55% reported that they felt forced by others to choose the abortion. 61% said that they felt as though others were in control of their lives. 44% were still hoping that the abortion clinic counselor would present another alternative on the day they went to the clinic. In other words, they were hoping that they would give them some other choice. Although the study sample was limited to women seeking counseling for post-abortion problems, it illustrates that there are significant rates of not only feeling pressured, but even forced to have an unwanted abortion among those women who experienced post-abortion issues. A report by the American Psychologist Task Force on Abortion and Mental Health found that feeling pressured by others to abort is a major risk factor for negative post-abortion psychological reactions. Indications of various, often synergistic forms of coercion are reflected in research findings that most women feel rushed or uncertain before abortion, yet 67% received no counseling beforehand, 79% were not informed about alternatives, and over 80% said they were not given enough information to make an informed choice. We're talking about coercion here. Up to 64% of abortions involve feelings of being pressured to have an abortion. Other factors such as rushed, deceptive, negligent, or conflicted, or profit-driven counseling can also have a significant and often synergistic effect, coercive effect. Furthermore, based on even the most minimal standards of care and human rights, such assembly line care is exploitative and at best, and recognized human rights abuse, even under liberal abortion laws. You know, it's very interesting when you put all that stuff together. Carol Everett spoke at the banquet for Heartbeat this year. And one of the first books I ever read about this issue was written by Carol Everett some 20, 25 years ago. I had a chance to walk up to her and thank her for that book because it helped guide my thinking and my understanding of this. And one of the things her experience is that she used to run an abortion clinic. And it was driven by profit. And they not only did they coerce young girls to have abortions, they deceived them into getting pregnant so that they would come back to them to get those abortions. Don't let anyone tell you that pro-choice is about choice. It's all about coercion. 64% of young ladies who have an abortion feel like they were dragged into it. A failure. She didn't give anybody a choice. She just went in and slaughtered these children. And then I want you to understand there's an obsession. And when part of that obsession is that under that coercion, they try to tell you how to think. You're not ready for this baby. You can't handle this baby. You're not strong enough. And what do? They keep, listen, a young lady, the average age 22, they find themselves pregnant. They didn't think they'd get pregnant, because they went through what they call comprehensive sex education in the schools, and they told them everything they need to know to not get pregnant, but yet they still get pregnant. Must be something wrong with the counseling they're getting, don't you think? And so they go in, and now they're feeling, how many of you ladies have ever carried a child? Okay. How many of you men? Okay, none of you. That's good. But here's what happens. I mean, ladies, don't those hormones start to make you a little more emotional? Start making you a little unsure of yourself? And then somebody comes in and tells you, well, that was dumb. Somebody beats up on you. Well, didn't you do what we told you in sex education class? Well, you're going to have to get rid of it. And somebody else starts thinking for you. Well, you can't take care of this baby. And they start to tell them, you've got a career, you've got a job, you don't have the money, you don't have the resources, you don't have the support, and they start telling them every reason. Trust me, you go into Planned Unparenthood, they're not going to give you a single reason to keep that child. They're not interested in you planning parenthood. They're interested in you taking the life of the child. And this girl gets beat up by her boyfriend, verbally, by her parents perhaps, by her grandparents, by her peers, and then by those who are supposedly giving her counseling. And they tell her it's all about her, but it's not. You realize when they tell you, whenever you have these debates about abortion, they always want to say, well, what about rape and incest? How many of you ever heard that question? What about rape and incest? You know, when we look at our values, whether it's rape or whether it's incest, you got to go back to the premise. Is it a life? See, can I kill somebody else because I've been raped? If it's a life, it's a life. But you know, I would almost strike a deal. It would not be a principled deal, but it'd be a pragmatic deal that says, okay, if that's the only reason you'll ever do an abortion is because of rape and incest, I'll strike the deal. Because I want you to understand how many reasons, these are reasons given for abortion. You realize that less than 0.5% of abortions are for rape? So if the only abortions we ever did were for rape, that would be less than 0.5% of all the abortions, 0.5% of all the abortions that are done. You realize how dramatic? That means we would eliminate 99.5% of all abortions. You know, if we eliminated 99.5% of all abortions, the abortion clinics would close. I mean, we could make that deal, and then there still wouldn't be any for that purpose because there would be no abortion clinics. This lady, Crystal Sorbet. Do you know Crystal? She's in Northwest Ohio. She lives in Bryan, Ohio. She says, do you have any idea what it's like to sit here and watch TV and to read someone that says that your life is less valuable than anyone else's? Do you know why she says that? Because she was conceived in rape. She's a massage therapist in Bryan, Ohio. Do you think her life is less valuable because of the circumstances that brought her into this world? You know, and she says, I'm thankful that my mom brought me into this world. She was raised by her grandmother. She says, I'm thankful that I had life. And says, when you say, with the exception of rape, what you're saying is, I did not deserve to be born. She says, I am pro-life, especially in the case of rape and incest, not accept him. And that's because something that I'm very passionate about at this point. I can't be silent anymore. If rape was a good excuse, her life would have been taken. Oh, and by the way, this beautiful little girl right here, Isabella, conceived in rape. Her mother made a great choice, don't you think? Oh, and then 1/1000% of the reasons given is incest. So, on a principle, it's still taking a life, but pragmatically, okay, if that's the only reason we're ever going to do an abortion is because of incest, guess how many abortions we'll have? None. 1/1000%. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. And by the way, they try to paint you as uncompassionate